We live in very interesting times now. It's quite amazing times. We live in a world where Agile methodologies, that's the gold standard against what we're building today, in IT at least. And still what I find is that you have projects that struggle to deliver, okay, on business outcome. And the question is why? We have things like you build it, you run it, it's our playbook. We have playbooks that talk about inception, so we kind of know what we've got to do. So the question is, why are we still struggling? And through my experience, what I've found is that this typically stems from, as a technology-minded person, that we want to build the best. That's it. We want to make sure that we're building something that is really robust. The problem sometimes is we then miss the boat for the business outcome that we're trying to deliver. Okay? And so, forgot about this one. Okay. I'm Faghmie Davids. For those that can't say the hard, the easiest is go Faghmie. Okay, that's my name. I've got about 20 years plus experience in IT. I've worked across a lot of domains, but predominantly it's been sort of financial services and retail. And I've worked in roles where I've been only on the business side, and I really have zero sort of worries about IT. And then I've gone all the way to the other spectrum where I only care about the IT and I don't care so much about the business side of things. So I've got that sort of knowledge as well. And then it's really, I think a lot of us maybe in the room has gone, we've been a developer at one point, we've been an architect, we've been sort of an analyst and so forth. So I think for everybody, that's kind of like our space, okay? And so what's happened with all of this and all of this knowledge that I've acquired is that I'm not in full screen mode. Sorry. Doesn't take a lot to distract me. Why is it not going to full screen mode? F11. So I'm just trying to do this quickly. There we go. Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. And this is really the topic that I want to talk about. How do we stop building features, we stop doing that, and we start delivering impact? Okay. And I'm going to take you on a journey of what I've gone through, and hopefully by going through this journey with me, you might have a sort of a fresh look on Agile as well. Okay. So, with everything that I've done, this is really the framework that I came up with. And simplistically what we're talking about is a new request comes in. So, every qualifying new request, I'm not talking about moving a button, changing the color of a button, adding in just a simple field onto a database table or an API where you just need to extend something small. We're talking about some sort of business outcome that's needed. And then once you've got that, you kind of go through a discovery phase. Once you've done your discovery, you go through the steel thread phase. And I think we all know about steel threads or heard of steel threads in some shape or form. You then go through some hardening. After you've done your hardening, there's some productionizing, operationalize. And at some point you decide, I need to actually put this into production. And that's really the framework that I would like to talk to you about. The request typically, kind of just to sort of frame your mind, you're kind of looking like, let's say, anything more than 3 months typically. That's the type of change that you're looking at. Okay, and so you might ask, yeah, Faghmie, and yet another framework, and here we go again, okay? And hopefully if I take you through my journey, then you'd understand why I came up with this framework and what the benefits that it actually brings, okay? And to do that, I want to sort of present you the challenge that we have. And this challenge, Everybody can hear me, hey? Because I'm not standing there. Okay, awesome. So I want to present you the challenge. And the challenge really, I had to do a bit of research a few weeks ago, okay? Because I presented something that it's all cool. But what does the stats say? How right are you really? So I thought, okay, let me go get some numbers up, because otherwise it's just kind of like my view on it, okay? And so I had a look at some of the numbers and some research, some of the stats. And the first thing that I found was the Standish Group Chaos Report says 75% of projects fail. Okay? This is where you need to get business outcome. And we've all experienced that in some shape or form. And you go, well, that's terrible. But then there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, and they say, if you look at the Deloitte report, they say, well, if your focus is on the user, you have a 40% chance of actually having a higher organizational performance. Okay? So that's what Deloitte is saying. So we go, we're on the right path. Okay, we're doing something good now. And then what you then do is you go look a little bit further. And then you find that if you go to Radix web, they did a bit of stats as well, and they say only 17.8% of companies are reporting that they are actually satisfied with what was delivered. Okay? And if you can remember what I said at the beginning, what I found is that as technologists, what we try to do is we try to make a perfect product. And then that was the first paragraph that I saw in the Deloitte report. So what happens is, every so often, we try to have a high-performing organization. We're trying to get business outcomes. We're trying to do the best that we can do. And there's latest things that comes up. And the problem is that we get stuck on that sometimes. Okay? And so how do you overcome this? Okay? How do you overcome this? And for me to sort of understand that, what I had to do is frame the context to myself. Okay? So the context is, I know that on the one side I've got business. And what does business say is, hey, I have a why we need to do this. Now the why is, hey, we need to increase sales, or this particular, let's call it a campaign, must go live by September, because that is when the season starts. If you're in retail, if it is something on financial services, it might be, hey, legislation is kicking in March 2025. It must be done by that time. If you deliver past that date, you might have an excellent product, but that when you haven't reached. And that was set by business, and sometimes it's not even in business control, okay, that date. But what business does is they will still tell you what is sort of your scope, what must you do. So they won't just say, hey, go solve world hunger. It's kind of like, I only need this campaign, and I only needed to do this, and I only needed to do for these customers. So they will ring fence that scope for you at least, okay? So that's a good thing. And so now we get these things, we go, okay, we know we need to increase sales, and it's got to be by a certain date, and we only need to focus on these products, for instance. And then we jump into delivery. That's what Equal Experts is good at. And we bring out our inception handbook, our playbook, and we go, okay, cool, we need to start doing planning. Let me understand what's going to happen. Once I know sort of all the security considerations, all the sort of the NFRs, you know, what's the load test that's going to run, how are we going to manage technical debt, all those things I'm considering in my planning. And then we're going to jump into execution, and now we start executing against that plan. And because we are Equal Experts, we run it, we build it, and we run it, which means we are going to consider how we should be running this product as well, or this solution at least. And so we do all these good things, but then there's a tug of war. I call it the tug of war, because you have business on the one side saying, I want this business outcome, and you've got the IT on the other side, Equal Experts saying, but I need to make sure this product is excellent, and it's doing exactly what it needs to do, so that doesn't just deliver on your business outcome, what you can see, but it also fulfills all the sort of the governances that we need to adhere to. So that's so important. And the important bit here is that business is not saying that, hey, I don't expect a million people to start clicking this button. They take for granted that we know we have to cover that. Okay, that's 9 out of 10 times. That's kind of like I found that that's a given. So the product excellence, it's not that it's only from an EE side. Business are expecting that, but it's kind of like they take that for granted. Okay, and business is really just more interested in the outcome. Can I start marketing for this product? Let's say in September. That's what they care about. Okay. So this is kind of the challenge that I was faced. Okay, and I then would like to take you through a journey of how, looking at this context, that I then went through on my journey to actually come up with this framework that I've sort of put together. Okay, and so the journey started. And it started around 2018. Okay, and this was healthcare insurance. And this was healthcare insurance within financial services. So this was one of the largest financial service houses in South Africa. And one of the things that we wanted to do in 2018 is it's healthcare insurance. So essentially, think of it as like we want to put a card in somebody's hand. So not everybody can afford medical aid in South Africa. So for the lower income, we want to give them a health insurance card, so they can go to certain doctors for X amount of doctor visits a year. If you've got to go need to get an ambulance, get preferential treatment, and so there's a couple of things linked to that. So when I started on this, it's like it was this huge boardroom, like 20, almost 30 people in the room. So think of it, I think we're all working with big corporates. You have different lines of businesses, and so we had representatives of each lines of business that was interested in this. And within the line of business that was actually sort of spearheading this initiative, which is the sort of the line of business I was in, there was various departments in there as well. So you have things like actuaries sitting in there, you have the people that looks after the financial product, you have legal sitting in this room, you have, because this financial card had to be, the insurance house did not have medical aid, that capability, the licensing really associated with that. So we partnered with a medical, I think it was like a medical aid, one of the medical aids in South Africa. So they were also in the room. And we went like for a few days. Just go round, and everybody was just trying to analyze what's happening. And it's one point that I said, well, stop the bus. Let's stop the bus, okay? There's a card that we want to get into somebody's hand, okay? Tell me how this thing is going to start. Okay, you tell me how it's going to start, and then what? And then what? And then I said, I know there's alternate paths, but just tell me, if all things are equal, what is that golden thread that you would need to follow to get the card from the time that a phone call is made to a call center to the time that the card is in the person's hand? What is the journey of that policy? And that's kind of the golden thread that I had to then follow. And that is really, because of this over-analysis and really analysis paralysis, okay? Where I kind of learned, hey, you do some discovery, i.e. you do some analysis and some sort of designing, but you don't over-analyze it. And then you jump into a steel thread. Now the question is, well, where does the steel thread start and where does it end? Well, there's actually some literature on this that says, well, you need to identify an execution path. That's the important part. And you look for a business outcome. You look for that one business outcome. In my instance, I wanted to put the card in the person's hand from the time that phone call was being made. And maybe just for context, what would happen in that instance is a call would land on the medical aid side. In fact, they outsource their call centers. And then that would be routed to us, the financial house. From the financial house, we had to then jump it over to another line of business where the actual policy was being created. From there, it would then jump up to the medical aid house, which was then an external call. From there, it then jumps out to some sort of courier service that we were using, and from there, they would then courier the card off to the person. So all of these things needed to be orchestrated, okay? And that's a lot of stuff. And understandably, because in financial services, you can't just launch something and then say, hey, we're going to run this for a couple of months, and guess what, it doesn't work, let's shut it down. You don't have that luxury. You have to honor that policy that you've given to this person. That's why it was so important. But we followed the steel thread, and we were then able, by not over-analyzing something, to do a steel thread. And that's how I got to the whole steel thread. I didn't call it steel thread back then, it was kind of just a golden thread. In fact, I still refer to it sometimes like that. So that was healthcare, and that was in 2018. That was quite an interesting journey. And then, now I know how to do discovery. And now I know about the steel thread. So guess what? Throw your recap for me at me, man. I know how to do this. And that's what I did. I moved to a retailer. This is the biggest retailer in Africa. It's the biggest retailer in Africa. And we were busy, it was the third iteration essentially of the platforming, and we had to do that. And I sat with I was the head of IT, and I was like, okay, what are we going to do? And like, no, I've got to do this. And I'm like, I've got this. We need to do our steel thread. We need to do some discovery. We need to understand what's going to happen, and then we've got to build the steel thread. We got awesome. Okay, so we start building the steel thread. Okay, you can place an order. You can then send it through to the sales. What is it, sales database or something? I forget what it was. And we've got the steel thread. We've got okay, cool. DevOps. Can we deploy this into pre-prod because you want to test it? They go, but you haven't done building it yet. You go, no, but we've done the steel thread. What do you mean? And then it became like, oh, but you haven't defined this. Like, you need to clarify this. So what we then found, or at least what I found, was that I needed to define more clearly what that steel thread was, but also within building a solution, you cannot just say, I'm going to build a steel thread, and then I'm going to build a solution. There's more to it. And that is where hardening of the solution came about, and operationalizing that solution. So why did we jump to operationalize? It's because we were engaging with DevOps. DevOps is all about observability. How am I going to go into CloudWatch and I'm going to know what's happened in this solution? How am I going to trace this thing? And then hardening was like, hey, you can do an ordering system, but what if? So yes, you can follow this golden thread. You do the steel thread, but guess what? You're going to start here, and sometimes you're going to end there, not here. Or sometimes you're going to start here, and you've got to end here as well. Or you've got to start here, and you've got to end there. So those are alternate paths, okay, of the business solution, okay, of the business outcome. And that's what hardening is about. Hardening says, you've got your steel thread, you've built your steel thread, okay, but now you need to harden that solution. You have to harden, you have to look at other use cases, other user journeys that could exist for this solution, okay? And we're not talking about edge cases here. We're talking about the most common ones, okay? And then operationalize is really just how do we have monitoring in place? How do we have reporting in place? How are we able to support this product? Okay. And so that was the learning really here, is that by engaging with the other teams, we found that just speaking about a steel thread was not good enough. Okay. You had to give it within the context of something bigger. There has to be more to it. Otherwise, what happens is people want to build the whole solution in that steel thread. I'm going to build all the observability in that steel thread. I'm going to build all the user journeys into that steel thread. And that kind of defeats the purpose of what a steel thread should be. Okay, so that was the learning here. And that was an interesting journey. It was quite nice. And that was 2021. And then when I went to some research, this is what I found. Actually, they still don't know what it is. There's no one definition of what a steel thread should be. That is what I found from the literature. And it kind of like resonated even when I speak to colleagues now still. You ask them, okay, are you building a steel thread? What is a steel thread? Well, I define it like this, and my other teammate defines it like this, and it goes back and forth. So, and what I found is this is because we only look at the steel thread. We don't look at the bigger context of how you're building the solution, hence the framework. And then in 2023, which was last year, it's when I joined E, I got moved on to a data platform. Now, the interesting part about the data platform is when I joined, I had a few calls, and I sat on the call, and the very first thing was, we have a team of highly skilled people, and they are truly highly skilled people, okay? But they're spinning. They've been sitting for 6 months trying to deliver something. They are not able to deliver this thing. The client is getting irritated. There's zero trust now from the client in terms of what we should be delivering. Faghmie, when you join, that is your objective. You need to make sure that this team turns into a high-performing. I got, buddy, I've got this. I have my framework, okay? Because I could kind of like see, they've done some initial work within the team to kind of understand what potentially was wrong. And guess what? They also came out with a steel thread, but then they were stuck there because they couldn't move past that. And I said, well, that's because when you're looking at the steel thread, you need to look at it in broader context. And so I worked with this team, implemented all the other stages, and one of the things that then popped up, because it's a data warehouse, is, well, you need to be a little bit more worried about your NFRs. You need to worry about security. You need to seriously worry about GDPR. Okay? And the first thing was, we'll just build it into hardening. We'll just build it into operationalize. The problem is then you're muddying the waters. Okay? Because now somebody could say, I'm building hardening, but I'm actually doing the NFRs as well, which kind of defeats the purpose. You don't want to muddy the waters, okay? And this is what I found there, is that people started muddying the waters, which is why operationalize then came about, which is, hey, during that phase, this is what we're going to be doing. We're looking at the NFRs, okay? What legislation, what's the governance, what is security things that we need to consider. And so, based on this journey that I've just described, is really where the framework came about, which is really all of this, which is, I literally this year then decided, well, let me codify this. And codify really means for me, let's go write it down somewhere, let's get the definitions down on paper, let's go do some research, put the research in there as well, and we get to this framework where you're going to go to discovery. Once you're done with discovery, you're going to build some steel threads, sorry, not steel threads, you're going to build a steel thread, you're then going to do some hardening. Once you've done some hardening, you start getting this product ready to be productionized, and finally, again, you build it, you run it, you make sure that it's operationalized, that you have observability in place. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, what it means is the following. You were probably wondering, oh, well, this is all fluffy stuff. I'm happy to hear that, Faghmie, but practically how does this work? Actually. So let's start with the context again. Context is, there's a business outcome. Business wants an outcome. IT wants a product that's excellent. Faghmie came along and said, hey, let's do this little framework, okay? Let's apply this framework. The question is, how do we do this? Well, when business comes along and they say, hey, there's an outcome, the first thing we do is we do a discovery. Discovery is about understanding this business context. The trick is not to try and do it to the nth degree. Remember, we live in an agile world. This is not waterfall. This is not doing all the analysis up front. This is doing just enough so that you understand your context of what you need to build. Discovery is also about saying, let's do a design. When you do a design, you're going to get things like, hey, I need to integrate into this API, but I don't know how I'm going to integrate. I don't know what the credentials are. Or I need to do an integration into a third party, external third party. I don't know who to engage with. I don't know what's the pattern that they're going to be using, okay? And it's saying, during my discovery, I recognize that that is something that we need to explore further down the line, okay? But then you at least have some sort of design. You kind of know what you're working with. And then finally, for discovery, it's really about saying, hey, what are the things that I think, if we do this in discovery, what are the things that we need to do? I call it like, let's just get an 80% hit. Don't try and do it to the nth degree, because then, you're going to be sitting there in analysis paralysis. So now you've done your discovery, and then the next thing that you do is you sit with the team and you decide on what the steel thread is. Now, important to notice that not all steel threads are equal. Across different domains, a steel thread might mean different things. A steel thread will identify for you potentially what's your system boundaries as well. Okay, so and that's part of it. Okay, you're not meant to in steel thread have the API connection in place. If you have it in place, great. But if you don't, you're building things that's within your control. That's your steel thread. An example, for instance, with steel thread is on a team. We started building. The team didn't know the technology stack at all. So we started building and we said, well, what's the steel thread going to be? Because remember, you do it as a team. This is not somebody sitting somewhere. This is not your delivery lead or you're the tech lead or the delivery lead sitting and saying, oh, this is what the steel thread is going to be. It's the team collectively sitting there and saying, hey, what is the steel thread going to be? So in this example, for instance, we started with what was our steel thread. Let's identify all the technical components. Let's understand how these things need to be stitched together. And that is what we do. Because remember, one of the criteria for a steel thread is finding the execution path. If you can do the business outcome, that's great. But how do you identify the execution path? And that's what we did. So our steel thread, let's call that in month 0, was, do we know how to connect these components? And then can we get an execution path? Took us like, I think, 2 months to do this, but then we had our steel thread in place. Fast forward that 6 months, okay? Same team, okay? Different product that we were building. The steel thread now was no longer just that technical execution path, because now we know that, okay? Now it was, what is that one business use case that we want to output? Because we understand now the technical things. But, so it's still the steel thread, but the context is now different, okay? So that is just something that you need to keep in mind with steel thread. This is not a silver bullet. This is not like all things, when you do a steel thread, this has got to be it. As a team, you decide what is that steel thread, okay? As the tech lead, or as any lead within that team, all you need to do is keep the team honest in terms of what that steel thread should be. And then once you've done the steel thread, we now start moving over to making this product a little bit more excellent. Okay, so now we start hardening this product. What's the other use cases? So we start building that in. Once we've done all the sort of the use cases, we then can move on to, okay, let's productionize this now. So we know it does what we know it needs to do. Let's now, hey, is this secure? Yeah, can it take the load? Now, another important point to note here is, because you know this framework, when you are doing your discovery, it doesn't mean that you're only focusing there on that business outcome. You are considering all these things in your discovery. When you are building your steel thread, it doesn't mean that you're not catering for security. It doesn't mean that you're not catering for, load testing, but what it means is you're not building it up. You're keeping placeholders in place. You're making sure that when you are building this, you put the appropriate things in place to know, hey, I'm going to come back and I'm going to extend on this. But you're not building it up, because that's the trap. Is that typically, as engineers, when we start with it, I'm going to build this feature and I'm going to knock it out now. I don't want to touch it again. And that's when you start spinning. And then finally, once you've done all of these things, you then operationalize it. Again, I've put the placeholders in place. I know I've got to do some logging. I know I've got to do some reporting. The placeholders are there. I'm now building this out. I'm fleshing it out. What we've done, for instance, when we've built solutions is we start with steel thread. So with all our solutions, we've got the auditing in place. We're building first version here already. Sometimes it's literally just we have created the audit table. It's simple as that. Or we actually have Slack notifications that's going off, but guess what? It's a ton of them all over the show. But that's fine, because we're still here. We still need to get here. Okay? So it's a journey. That's my little, that's the framework that I'm hoping to present. And yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. I think I'm 3 minutes over. Okay.